Hey, good afternoon to you. 507 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. 2 weeks ago, what's the state of the race? Joining us now, a man when he's not finally representing a conservative viewpoint on CNN. He's digging into all this data. Ryan Girdusky joins us now, the author of the National Populist Newsletter. Ryan, great to have you with us, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Also, what is CNN thinking? What's going on?
I'm going on tonight, so at 11 o'clock, so tune in to CNN and see a conservative on the network.
I love it. I love it. It's producing all sorts of really great clips, and I'm just enjoying it. So keep up the good work, Ryan. I think you're doing great.
Appreciate that.
How do you assess the state of the race right now?
I mean, it's very difficult because in a number of important states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, there is no party enrollment. So we don't know. I mean, we know the numbers of early voters. We kind of know where they come from,
right?
But we don't know if it's Republicans or Democrats. So in the states that we do know, in Pennsylvania, Arizona, Nevada, and North Carolina, and Florida, even I'll throw it in there, Florida's voting numbers are through the roof for Republicans. Arizona's got a very high number, and the good thing with Arizona is the Republicans are doing a very good job at getting out their low propensity voters. In Nevada, which was supposed to be Harris's safe swing state that she was likely going to win, the early vote numbers are not very strong for her at all. The firewall of the Clark County, being Nevada, are so low that John Ralston, who is a political observer and in Nevada, he's only ever called one race incorrectly, and he's been doing it for 40 years in the state, and that was a state house race.
Yeah.
He says, it's not over yet for Kamala, but it is in very, very bad shape. Mark Halpern, I was just listening to his thing. He said, come Election Day, if this goes on for another week or so, we are going to know that Donald Trump will be elected president before Election Day at the rate they're currently going.
Right. And Clark County is really kind of the whole ballgame, actually, in Nevada, because it's the population center. It's Las Vegas. It's where everybody lives. And right now what it looks like is that, according to John Ralston and others who are looking at this really closely, Republicans are doing incredibly well.
Republicans are motivated in a way that they haven't been in a very long time. It could be because they feel, Biden is so bad. It could be because, they're so motivated by Trump. They think that he was robbed 4 years ago, or they just think that Kamala would be a disaster. I'm, partisan to all three opinions.
Yeah.
But they are highly motivated to get out and vote in a very strong way, in a way that Democrats are not motivated by Kamala Harris. And the insane delusional thing you hearing from the media that, Trump is so bad, he's the end of the world, he's a terrorist, he's a Nazi, he's this, he's that. You can only do that for so long, and then you go watch, the Al Smith dinner, and Chuck Schumer and him are laughing together, buddy. Sorry, I wouldn't laugh with Hitler if I was sitting next to me at a dinner table.
Of course.
You know what I mean? That the game is kind of over, and you have Antonio Brown, who I've been told is a big NFL player, campaigning for Trump in Western Pennsylvania.
Uh-huh.
You have Elon Musk. You have much higher caliber celebrities and also minorities sitting there and saying, it's fine to vote for Trump. And I think the shine is really off of the whole, let's call him a Nazi until we turn blue in the face.
So I know that it seems the left is not, of course, relying on an appealing candidate to win this election. The thought has been that they're going to win because their machine is better. They've got all the money. They've got to get out the vote machine. They're going to get their voters to the polls. And in fact, they've been making a mockery of the right's get out the vote effort, saying that it's put together with Scotch tape. It's not very effective. What are the current turnout numbers telling you about how organized the right is?
Well, I mean, in some states, the states that we obviously know, there is it's super strong. So I'll pull up, let's talk about Pennsylvania, because it is the titular swing county. If we don't have Pennsylvania, it becomes very, very difficult to kind of map out 270 votes. It's not impossible, but it's much, much harder. So in Pennsylvania, as of right now, Republicans have absentee ballot requests that came in. They have 561,000 absentee ballot requests. It's 30% of all ballot requests. Democrats have 57.7% of all ballot requests, which is 1,080,000. That seems like, whoa, it's a huge landslide for Democrats. But go back in time. Republicans have 273,000 more absentee ballot requests than they did in 2022. Democrats have 116,000 more absentee ballot requests. Go back to 2020, COVID, obviously everyone was voting absentee ballot, or a lot of people were. Republicans are only 200,000 absentee ballot requests shy of their 2020 numbers. Democrats are 850,000 votes shy of their 2020 numbers. Now, what the Democrats are coping by saying is that, oh, it could be that these are all people who are going to go vote, and it's just they're eating their election day vote, and our voters will just show up on election day. That could be true, but there is a lot of early vote in Arizona, in Nevada, of people who don't vote or who have never voted before, who are Republicans. Some data I got today of mail-in ballot applications, 7%, 36,000 of all the PA Republicans are people who have or new voters. 48,000 are people who have never voted before, which is higher than a lot of Democrats of people who have never voted or voted absentee, and they have a 2-to-1 advantage. That's an enormous gift to the GOP. Not to mention the people are still going to show up on election day. Republicans win election day vote. So if they can keep Democrats' margin in Pennsylvania down to under 500,000 in the mail-in ballot, there's a very strong chance that they will win enough of election day vote to win. If Democrats somehow have a 600,000 absentee margin in Pennsylvania, it becomes much, much more difficult. And that's what Democrats have always hoped for, is that they bank so many early votes that come election day, there's just not enough Republicans, because election day, everyone knows somebody who couldn't vote because their kid gets sick, their car breaks down, it works late, it snows, it rains, whatever, and they just don't show up to vote. So or the machines break down or whatever. So by banking this many absentee ballot requests and getting the ballots in their hands and either handing it in on election day, mailing it before election day, whatever the case they're doing it,
yes,
they are keeping Democrat margins very narrow.
Right. And if you're the kind of person who's suspicious about the left and their shenanigans, you should probably get in while they think their voters are doing it. You know what I mean? Which is during the early vote.
And I'll say this right now. The Republicans in 2022 only led in Pennsylvania in 2 counties in the absentee votes. And in 2020, they led in 13 counties. Right now, they lead in, I'm looking at it right now, it is probably 25 counties they lead in, with another 5 or 6 that they can get ahead in. That's quite a few. That's not a small amount, to say the least. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the Republicans are amplified. We're seeing it in Nevada. We're seeing it in Arizona.
Yeah.
And we're seeing it to a certain extent in Pennsylvania. It's just a matter of, can this momentum continue for a week and a half?
What factor do you think all of this demographic upheaval is going to play in the election? Because it is interesting that, Trump support is growing in all sorts of groups that the Democrats thought that they had on lockdown. It's possible that Trump could win a majority of the so-called Hispanic vote. He's growing his percentage with the black vote pretty monumentally. I'm seeing reports now that in Michigan, it looks like Trump could actually win the Arab American vote there, which could lead to a really interesting election where he wins both the Arab American vote and the Orthodox Jewish vote in the same election. What do you think is happening?
I mean, that's possible. What I think is going to happen, I think probably a lot of people when they look at elections, they assume states are stagnant, one election to the other. Like, oh, they lost by 10,000 votes in Georgia last time, so 10,000 is not that hard to make up. That is true, but states are not stagnant. Running in 2 different election cycles like stepping into a river twice. It's a different river. So in Georgia, right, I'm writing this for my Substack for the National Populist Newsletter. 263,000 people in Georgia have already voted that have never voted in the state before, right? 263,000, larger than the margin in the last few election cycles. 45% of those new voters are over the age of 50. I think that's something that people don't talk enough about, is the amount of people who have left blue states because of COVID, and this is their first presidential election. People who left California moved to Arizona and Nevada. People who left New York and New Jersey to get to North Carolina and Georgia, or priced out of Florida because the whole world moved to Florida for 2 years, and they couldn't afford Florida anymore, so they moved up to Georgia. That is not a small number of people. Nevada has very similar numbers to that. So the senior communities in those areas are growing tremendously, and that will be very important to sit there and maybe help counter the Gen Z vote, which is going to be heavily for Kamala Harris. As far as Michigan goes, yes, the Muslim vote really does matter. They don't think – I was on the CNN panel a couple of days ago, and this reporter came on and she said she'd interviewed a bunch of Muslim business owners in Michigan, and not one was voting for Kamala. They were either voting for Jill Stein because they want to be super pro-Palestine, or they were voting for Trump, not because they think Trump is more pro-Palestine than pro-Israel, but they believe that he can stop the war. Somehow his election will stop the war.
That he's a peace candidate.
Well, that he's just and this is what Boris Johnson said, he brings a lot of uncertainty to the table, and foreign leaders are worried about him. They don't want to mess around because they actually are afraid of Trump because they think that he's, a little off-hinged, and sometimes reading his tweets he can be. That's not a bad thing when you're the executive in chief, and you are sitting there and trying to move the chess pieces on the world map to make sure other countries avoid bad doings. And we saw that the minute Trump left, Russia invaded Ukraine. A few years later, Gaza invaded. Iran has been out of control. North Korea started testing missiles again. China is building their navy closer and closer towards Taiwan. All these things because they think the leadership, the current leadership of the United States, is very weak, and they are scared of Trump. That is not a bad thing that you want from the president if you believe in the idea of peace through strength. So those are all things that I think are working in his benefit when it comes to the Arab voters. They think that people will just calm down because they don't want to upset the wild man in the White House.
Okay, so let me ask you about the other candidate. Kamala Harris is not on the campaign trail today. She's not doing any campaign events. She's doing 2 interviews, or she may have already concluded them. One with NBC's Hallie Jackson, the other with Telemundo's Julio Vaquero. That's today, and she didn't do any campaign events. She's got 14 days left to go. She's going to Texas on Friday. On Friday for a rally in Houston. In the final 2 weeks, she's going to a state that she has no chance of winning for I don't know what reason. And then
Waltz is going to Kentucky.
And then what's that?
Waltz is going to Kentucky.
What are they doing?
Maybe they got lost. I mean, listen, it makes sense why you would go to Texas if you think that Colin Allred can beat Ted Cruz, and the Democrats are pouring a lot more money in that race. So if that is the case, and I've heard from a number of people that the race in Texas is closer than it should be, and I don't want to say that, it's closer than it should be, and Cruz is not in the best position. So, I mean, he's not going to lose right now, but he's not in a strong position.
But how does Kamala help Colin Allred? That's what I want to know. It's almost like Ted Cruz is planning this visit.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think that maybe turning out black voters in Houston. Houston's got a ton of black voters who moved there after Hurricane Katrina. I don't know. I think that would maybe the only thing that they could sit there and do, bring out the white mom vote, the drunken vote. I don't know. It's the wine mom vote. I don't know. Like, it could be those people that she's sitting there and leaning on to try to help Colin Allred. And think, okay, if I think I can win, but I need the Senate, and the only way path to the Senate, honestly, is either a miracle in Nebraska or Texas.
Yeah, but this is, and meanwhile, all of the other Senate candidates are running away from her. They don't want anything to do with her in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania.
They're running pro-Trump commercials.
Yes. Yeah. They're like
in the 3 leading Democrats in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania are running Trump commercials. That says everything.
Pro-Trump, not against him. Pro. They're like, I can work with Trump.
Commercials.
Yeah.
Yes, how great they were working with Donald Trump. And it's so funny because Elise Slotkin from Michigan, the Democrat from Michigan, she said her internals had Kamala leading, and they said, oh, it's just a fundraising ploy. Then Tammy Baldwin said she won't even appear in public with Kamala anymore. Wouldn't go to the Liz Cheney event. They said that was a fundraising ploy. And now they're running pro-Trump commercials, and they just stopped saying anything. It's bizarre.
And Slotkin's telling people that they can split ticket vote for Trump and for me. She's saying so. It's
she said that. That's crazy.
It's chaotic. It's actually hilarious. Ryan Girdusky, thank you as always. Look forward to chatting with you again soon and playing your clips from CNN. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
It's just unbelievable. Kamala Harris was campaigning with Maria Shriver yesterday. And Dave in Silver Spring is calling in about this Line 6 and wants to weigh in on that subject. Hello, Dave. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. What do Maria Shriver and Kamala Harris have in common?
What's that?
Well, both their husbands like nannies, correct?
Quite a bit.
Now, did Arnold's nanny keep the baby, or did she give it up?
Arnold's nanny kept the baby. She had a son, and that didn't happen in the Doug Emhoff case when he knocked up the nanny.
Right.
That didn't turn out that way.
Hey, Vince?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, of course I'm joking around, but my point is that this is a party made up of broken, flawed people who don't seem to know the difference between right and wrong.
There's a lot. Yeah, I think you're right about that, Dave. Oh, it's a good observation, though. I hadn't even thought of it. Maria Shriver and Kamala Harris sharing a stage, commiserating both their husbands knocked up the nanny. Something to think about. Stay with us. Tim Walz spoke today on stage. He's ridiculous. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 5:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL. We're making sense of the news. You can join us today at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The very first clips of Kamala Harris's chit-chat with MSNBC today are coming out now. I haven't gotten a chance to listen to this yet. Would you like to listen together? Let's do it. Kamala Harris sitting with Hallie Jackson, Curtis Houck over at Newsbusters, pulling this clip.
We are sitting here 2 weeks away from election night. Last election, the former president came out on election night and declared victory before all the votes were counted. What is your plan if he does that again in 2 weeks?
Has anybody ever declared victory on election night before every single vote was counted? Yeah, actually, I think that always happens. Usually you handicap the election. You're like, it seems like this guy's probably going to win. People declare victory. You're not allowed to do that.
Last election, the former president came out on election night and declared victory before all the votes were counted. What is your plan if he does that again in 2 weeks?
Well, let me say this. We've got 2 weeks to go, and I'm very much grounded.
I love how the question here is posed as if Donald Trump isn't the front runner. He is. He's right now leading in all of the swing states. He's likely to become the next president of the United States if the American people have their say. So I love the frame up here. It's like, what do you do if Trump declares victory? And put differently, like, how willing are you to try and steal this election?
Well, let me say this. We've got 2 weeks to go, and I'm very much grounded in the present in terms of the task at hand, and we will deal with election night and the days after as they come, and we have the resources and the expertise and the focus on that as well.
So we've got a whole plan to steal the election. Don't you worry your little head.
Team's ready to go. Is that what you're saying? Are you thinking about that as a possibility?
Of course. This is a person, Donald Trump, who tried to undo a free and fair election, who still denies the will of the people, who incited a violent mob to attack the United States Capitol, and 140 law enforcement officers were attacked.
You know, they have such a contempt for the voter that they want to preclude you from knowing the details of Hunter Biden's life in the closing days of the election. They don't want you to know about the corruption of the Biden family. They want to hide it from you. The federal government, in concert with the FBI, in concert with the social media companies, the big tech companies, the big media, legacy media companies, suppress information in the final days of the election in order to rig the American mind. It's kind of the whole point. If you can, what better way to rig an election than mind control? It's the most obvious way to do it. The left is specialized in that. And she's acting like everything was on the up and up.
The will of the people, who incited a violent mob.
You have people ignoring election laws in Pennsylvania to recreate the way that they conduct their elections, not just Pennsylvania, states across the country. How come people doubt our elections?
To attack the United States Capitol, and 140 law enforcement officers were attacked.
Peacefully and patriotically. Only Ashley Babbitt was murdered.
Some were killed. This is
Nobody was killed. None. No. Only Trump supporters died on January 6th.
Serious matter. The American people are, at this point, 2 weeks out, being presented with a very, very serious decision.
Yeah.
About what will be the future of our country.
Wow. Riveting. Does that sound like a hard-hitting interview to you? What are you doing to prepare to insist that you are the actual victor of this election? NBC asks. What happens if Donald Trump comes out on election night and declares that he won? Well, we have teams ready for that. This is so stupid. So no more Brett Baer interviews. Have you noticed that the Joe Rogan conversation has disappeared? Kamala Harris, no, there was some conversation like a week or so ago that, oh, she's going to go on Joe Rogan. No, she's not. No, she's not. I hope she does. I really hope she does. She's not going to do it. She can barely handle 20 minutes of Brett Baer. She can't handle a 10-minute View interview without stepping on a rake and having it hit her in the face. You think she's going to do 3 hours with Joe Rogan? Not a chance in hell. There is no way that that's happening. President Trump is, all the reports are coming out today that President Trump is going to be sitting with Joe Rogan on Friday to do his podcast. I'm looking forward to that. And I don't know how quickly they release those things. I don't know if it's like he does it the same day and it's released within minutes or something. But whatever the arrangement is, obviously it's coming out before the election. So you and I will be talking about it going into next week. But President Trump, Joe Rogan expected to sit down together on Friday. So President Trump has a real reason to be in Texas Friday. That's where Rogan shoots. Although maybe Rogan comes to him. I'm not sure what you do when it's President Trump. Maybe that's how they'll arrange it. It's probably easier, actually, than getting the Secret Service to shut down a whole neighborhood or wherever Joe Rogan does this thing. So we'll see. We'll see. So Kamala Harris not on the campaign stage today. Her running mate, though, Tim Walz, is out there acting like a weirdo again. He was on a stage in Madison, Wisconsin today, standing alongside Barack Obama. Obama was being preposterous. Obama took credit. Did you see Obama took credit for Trump's economy? He said, why is everyone saying it's Trump's economy? That was mine, he says, which is another way of saying you didn't build that. Remember that? That was Obama's line. You didn't build that. Obama is very angry that people think Trump was a good president. And then Tim Walz, let's see here. I'm going to find this clip. Tim Walz, this is the bottom of my cut sheet. There we go. Here we go. Here's Tim Walz today attacking Elon Musk. Listen to this attack and think, boy, if this is not the pot calling the kettle black.
Elon's on that stage, jumping around, skipping like a dipshit on these things. You know it.
Jumping around and skipping like a dip bleep, says Tim Walz. Tim Walz, who every time he steps on a stage looks like he's about to perform a show tune. Every time he waves with both hands. He's a ridiculous. He's like he looks like a character on a Macy's Day Parade float without the costume. Like he's the guy underneath the costume waving both hands. Hello, kids. Lip syncing to some ridiculous song. That's Tim Walz. That's Tim Walz. So that he's on Sirius. President Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, just did an interview with Theo Von, the Theo Von podcast. He's a comedian. President Trump, you'll remember, not too long ago, did this interview with Theo Von and was talking to him about what cocaine is like. Theo Von was talking about his past with drug addiction, and President Trump was asking him all sorts of questions. What was that like? Theo Von was giving some pretty funny answers, actually. Here's J.D. Vance with Theo Von today, and of course, Theo brought up drug addiction because J.D. has pretty famously told this story in Hillbilly Elegy, what his life was like, what it was like growing up with family members with drug addiction, and they had a pretty important exchange, I think.
But what suggestion or like just advice or thoughts would you give to a young person who has a parent who has alcoholism as to how to navigate that? Because I even get messages a lot from people that are like, hey, my dad is struggling or this, what do I do? Yeah. I don't know what to do here, you know? Do you have any thoughts on that? And it's not like you're a specialist.
Yeah, no, I'm not a specialist. I mean, here's what I try to do. I mean, take this for what it's worth. But number one is you gotta, if you're a kid and you're in an environment where there's a lot of addiction, you got to make sure that you're taken care of, right? Like, don't get yourself in such a situation where it's not just your parent that is struggling, but it becomes you that's struggling too, right? Because you can't help them out. You can't help them out unless you're able to take care of yourself first,
right?
That's number one. I think number two is, as hard as it is, man, and shit, I know this very well because there were times when I had some very angry moments with my mom. Don't get resentful and try to keep your heart as open as possible, right? You got to compartmentalize a little bit, right? There's the addict version, but then there's the version that, that read you a book when you were a kid, or there's the version that took you to, your favorite movie, or you try to hold on to the memories that are completely divorced from the addiction. Because I think if you allow yourself to become totally resentful, then it doesn't just affect them, it starts to affect you too, right?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Good advice from J.D. Vance. Keep yourself grounded. Don't allow yourself to be destroyed by this. Make sure you're in a healthy place. Take care of yourself. That's really key because you don't want two people dragged down by this. And when you feel like you're in a good place, then use the blessings that God has given you to try and take care of your parent to get them out of this. It's good advice. J.D. Vance, I can't tell you the number of people I've talked to who've come around on J.D. Vance. Have you experienced this at all? You talk to people like Republicans, conservatives. You have this conversation. Like, what do you think of J.D. Vance? I didn't think he was the right pick at first, but man, I love him now. I've heard that so much. So much. There were a lot of establishment Republicans who were opposed to him because he doesn't subscribe to their program. He's not really in on the full, establishment agenda. Because as best I can tell, I don't know JD. I don't know him, but you know how you get a sense of somebody? Right? Like you get a sense of Trump, for sure. You can get a sense of him, whether you work near or far from him. You have a basic idea of who he is. Mostly because he can't stop telling you about who he is. He's very open about who he is, warts and all. Whereas a lot of politicians think that they can deceive you about who they are and what their agenda is. Trump's not doing that. Trump doesn't even take a salary from the government. He donates every last dollar he receives back into the projects of the American government on behalf of the American people. But J.D. Vance, he's got a great story. And he genuinely cares, you can tell, about the well-being of Americans. He fits perfectly with President Trump's agenda. So as a representative of that agenda, I think he's been a fantastic choice. Fantastic. And I thought that from the very beginning. I loved J.D. Vance for this. And I'm glad so many others have come around to my view on this subject, which is he's great at this. And there was a learning curve. The first few events that he did and the first few interviews he did, he was trying to get his sea legs a bit. That took almost no time for this guy. He's running circles around the adversarial press. Anybody who confronts him, he has a better grip of the data and what the voters actually care about. He's able to navigate those worlds of elite claptrap and just everyman wisdom. He's good. He's really good. And I'm eager for these two to win. President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance. And one of the things I'm looking forward to is what does Trump task him with? What is President Trump going to expect out of him? Oftentimes, vice presidents throughout American history are merely sort of mascots for the administration. They do very little. They're assigned ceremonial events, and it's kind of laughed at as a very high-profile but useless job. As I've mentioned before, Kamala Harris's vice presidency has been markedly different because, one, the chief executive in that administration is senile, and two, she has cast more tie-breaking votes in the United States Senate than any vice president in American history. So her role has been impactful and negative for the rest of us. You're paying more for everything because of her. Because of her. Not just because she's vaguely associated with the Biden administration. No, because of Kamala Harris, you're paying more for everything. I hope President Trump gives J.D. Vance something important to do. I really do. I think he will. I think we're coming in. This is going to be a very different environment. This is not a world where the Republican establishment is going to just pick the list of people who work for Trump. Trump will look at that list and say, okay, I'm new to Washington. I'm going to go with your picks. Let's see how it works out. And then have to fire a bunch of people who are just doing awful jobs and don't have a consistent vision with what the voters wanted in the first place. We can't go through that again. That can't be the case. And I think, don't hold me to it, but I'm optimistic about it, that it's going to be very, very different this time. And J.D. Vance gives me a lot of hope. And I don't know. Do you think about it? You ever sit around? I talk to family and friends about it. I'm like, just think about it, how different it is. You kind of know who's on your side now, right? If you're Trump. You know Elon's on your side. He's fighting for you. Will there be differences of opinion? Yeah. RFK Jr. is on your side. Will there be differences of opinion? Of course. Tulsi Gabbard is on your side. Those people are on your side. But also the people who worked in the administration, and the people who've been out there fighting in the face of the establishment's unstoppable power, their tyrannical power. The Mike Davises, the Rick Grinnells, the Stephen Millers who are out there, all of these guys who, they've made it really clear over time what they stand for, what they believe, and how willing they are to fight. Peter Navarro, guys have gone to prison because they've been attacked by the Biden administration. Political opponents who've been imprisoned for their opposition to the regime. A lot of people have been through the fire now. They've come out on the other side of it and they say, I'm still a patriot. I still want to fight for this country. Pretty amazing. So President Trump has a big list to pick from. And again, I hope J.D. Vance is very much a part of helping guide this country away from the brink of disaster. All right, so we began this week with some news reporting that President Biden is being kept away from the campaign trail and that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden will not be campaigning together at all going into Election Day. We'll see if that holds. But President Biden went to New Hampshire today alongside Bernie Sanders, and just moments ago, he declared, I'm going to play audio for you here. I haven't heard it myself, but what we're being told, Jeff Mason at Reuters says that President Biden just said we have to lock Donald Trump up just a few moments ago. Take a listen to this. Here we go.
He is talking about doing away with the entire Department of Education. He's talking, he means it. This is not a joke. This is a guy
empowering parents and communities.
Who also wants to replace every civil servant, every single one. Thinks he has a right under the Supreme Court ruling on immunity to be able, if need be, if it was the case, to actually physically eliminate, shoot, kill someone who he believes to be a threat to him.
What?
I mean, so I know this sounds bizarre. It sounds like I said this 5 years ago, you'd lock me up. We got to lock him up. Politically lock him up.
Wait, what was that last little caveat? Did he say political lock him up? Is that what he said?
Politically lock him up.
So he tried to bail out of it at the end. Political lock him up. We've got to lock him up. Now, you understand how this works. If everything was reversed, this would be the talk of all the Sunday shows. Speaker Mike Johnson would be called to the carpet. You need to account for the tyranny of Donald Trump saying something like that. Of course, that will not happen. This is a blip on the radar. It's only going to be conservative media that even talks about this, mentions it. The legacy media, maybe prove me wrong. They're going to cover this thing up. And Kamala Harris, will she be asked to account for this? That her boss just said, we have to lock up my political opponent? I mean, it shouldn't come as a surprise that it's his desire. That's how he's been using his Department of Justice. And these people have the nerve to say that Trump is the tyrant as they seek to imprison their political opponents by the hundreds. Stay with us. The great one, Mark Levin, up next on WMAL.